today. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe even good evening. Thank you for joining us today for a conversation all about AI, what it is, why you need it, and what you'll lose without it. We're going to dive right in. We have about 45 minutes to get through a ton of questions and stories from four very well-versed, well-known marketers, leaders in the SaaS space. So I'm going to start by introducing myself first. My name is Mark Kilens. I am with a company called Drift. We're a revenue acceleration platform helping companies grow their qualified pipeline and grow their revenue faster with the power of conversational marketing and sales. I head up the content and community teams at Drift. And now I'd like to introduce each one of our panelists who are going to teach you all about how they are thinking about AI and where they think it's headed and how their organizations are using AI. First off, Dan Ning, Executive Vice President of Innovation at PathFactory. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited about this conversation. So I have to ask you the question, what is something this summer you're looking forward to doing?
I just had a second kid last December, so we're not really going to get out too much. So it's really just spending time with them, enjoying the outdoors. We're based in Toronto, so we're still a bit locked down up here as well, too. So pretty much kind of keeping around the area and staying in the city. Nice.
That'd be fun, though, keeping it low key. Congrats. We had our first child about 16 months ago. So I know how you feel. So definitely. Right. All right. Thank you, Dan. Next up, Randi Barshack, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at RollWorks. Randi, what's going on?
Not much. So thanks for having us here today.
Of course. And same question.
What I'm doing? Well, I had my first about 16 years ago, he lives and breathes basketball. And in San Francisco, where we live, they actually even took the nets down. Not even the nets, the rims, everything was down. So he is very eager to get back on a court. So we will all be getting on airplanes and playing in some AAU tournaments. Don't have the airplane reservations yet because that feels a little bit far away and surreal that we'd be back on airplanes, but our plans are to play some basketball. I don't know if it's my idea of fun, but I say it is. So yeah, we'll be watching a lot of AAU basketball this summer.
And seeing some parts of the country, traveling a little bit.
Yeah, that's
great. Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Next up, Chris Newton, Vice President of Marketing and Business Development at Intellimize. Chris, how are you today?
Hey, Mark, happy to be here. Yeah, I lead marketing and our business development team. So all things like building pipeline for sales where I'm focused. I know the question's coming. So I got three boys, a little older, more like Randi, I guess. We're here on the West Coast. So we're going to hop on a plane and venture out and see the Atlantic Ocean for a change in, August timeframe. Check out the main coast, a little bit of a different change of scenery and get outdoors and enjoy that while we can.
I love it. The best coast. Have that debate in the chat. Fantastic. And finally, Lucas Welch, VP of Corporate Marketing at Highspot. Lucas, what's up?
Mark, fantastic to be here. Glad to be a part of this esteemed panel. And thank you to all of our attendees. Corporate marketing at Highspot means myself and my team are responsible from everything from brand stewardship and PR at the very top of the funnel, all the way through demand generation, field marketing, and events. We, of course, use Drift on our website, also part of what my team takes care of here at Highspot. I got back from Hawaii 3 weeks ago, so I've done the jet plane thing. Alaska Airlines did a fantastic job, as did the state of Hawaii. It was beautiful. I strongly recommend it. And later this summer, we'll keep it closer to home with the more classic Northwest summer, doing a little bit of camping, doing a little bit of horseback riding, being in the great outdoors, and grateful for it.
Fantastic. You got to spend that time outside during the summer. It's key. All right. So that's the panel. We're going to dive right into the agenda. And folks, we want to make this a conversation. The whole thing is basically a conversation, but we want to make this a conversation with you. So please open up the Zoom chat, change the setting in the Zoom chat to all panelists and attendees. That's the first thing that you got to do. I don't know why Zoom has it defaulted to just panelists. Change that setting. And as you think of ideas or questions, answers to the questions I ask these folks, chime in the chat. I got it right open. And we're going to cover the first 3 items for the longest for the next 40 or so minutes. We'll do like a fire round at the end with a prediction from each of these folks about the future. But we're going to spend the majority on the first 3 that you can see on this slide right now. So I want to dive right into the first question, speaking about the role and impact that AI has had today, how we live, how we work, how is it changing how we do business. So I'm going to first ask the question to, let me just pull up the exact question I want to get, sorry. To Chris, how would you define your team and company's relationship with AI right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So AI is really the heart of our solution. And the founding team came from experience at Yahoo when they used AI machine learning, had hundreds of engineers working on this to personalize Yahoo site when it was the biggest site on the internet. So, we see the largest squandered opportunity in all of marketing today is really low conversion rates on websites, and their experience has helped us address this problem. So, marketers spending billions to get people to the website, and then they get there and it's kind of this static one size fits all experience. So we're solving that problem with AI. We drive, high conversion with machine learning so that you take the best creative ideas from the marketers on your team and you use those with machine learning, serving them up to optimize web experiences for each unique visitor. And even when that changes over time, they get a personalized, optimized page for what they need now. And only machine learning makes that possible.
Yeah, I love that. I say quite often that most websites are built for the business, the brand, the marketer, and are not built for the customer. And I think AI can change that in a big way. And I know, Lucas, you wanted to chime in on this as well.
Got to figure out how to work mute, unmute. It's like I've never been on a Zoom call before. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting one at Highspot, because I'll admit, AI probably didn't even understand it was part of my life until I started working at Highspot. And we're both a consumer and provider of AI in terms of our sales enablement platform. And it's a very basic concept. It's a SaaS platform that tries to make it easier for sales to be more successful. One of the big components of that is our AI. It spends a significant amount of time looking at the content, the plays, and the activities that the salespeople using our platform do, and determining, is it driving results at the end of the day? Are you seeing that pipeline generation? Are people taking the training? Are they passing the tests? Are they using the content? Is the content associated with actual deals at the end of the day? Now, on the marketing team, we also get a tremendous amount of benefit from Highspot, both internally and marketing customers, because we're looking at the content we create. And that's content, that's campaigns, and that's, again, thinking about, is that content influencing revenue? Is the content, when it's being opened, is it being shared multiple times? What type of content has the highest propensity to convert a person from one stage of the funnel to the next? And how can you replicate that success? And so I've really been in a crash course of learning about AI over the past 2.5 years in my time at Highspot. It's just really exciting to see what it unlocks for marketers in terms of understanding what's making an impact, how to take those lessons, iterate, and continue to improve your programs, and really have a much more powerful conversation with sales about the thing that sales cares about most, which is, of course, revenue.
Yeah, it's helping create more efficiency, and we're actually a Highspot customer. We see this firsthand, making a more efficient way to deliver the right content and the right training, the right information, not only to your team, your sales team, but then also to the customer. So they can focus more on like what they do best, which is building the relationship.
Exactly. Having those conversations that count, and doing so because you had everything you need at your fingertips versus having to try to figure it out on the fly.
Love that. So next question, I want to turn it over to Randi. I want to get more personal with you specifically around your relationship with AI. How has your own relationship with AI technology changed over the last few years?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so it's changed quite significantly. I knew very little about AI, and then just prior to RollWorks, I was actually at a company that was a provider of training data solutions for AI companies. So we worked with hundreds and hundreds of AI machine learning companies, everything from autonomous vehicles to drug and disease research to marketing providers to ag tech. and ran a very big conference on AI. It was sort of a speed learning course in getting up to AI very quickly. I think my two main personal aha moments in coming from the AI space were, first of all, we often think of AI as being about the more difficult problems to solve. And that's really not true. AI is actually really about solving problems that are inherently easy for us as humans, but actually difficult for a computer. But there's more subjectivity. For example, is this a pen or not a pen? Well, it's actually really hard for a computer to figure that out because this pen has by the way, I just picked up exactly what was sitting on my, maybe that looks a lot like a spoon because it's a similar shape. So for human, this is a no-brainer, but a computer needs to be trained over and over again to understand the difference in the pixels it's seeing between this pen and this spoon. But once you train a computer to understand that, it can go through millions and millions and billions of pens or images in, seconds or nanoseconds, whereas it might take a human our entire lifetime. It's very easy, but we're constrained by time. And so that was sort of the first aha moment for me, was that to realize that AI is about simulating very easy, small decisions. So even self-driving car, for example, it's not suddenly you're in a car and it's self-driving. It's at any given second, the car is able to, the AI within the car is able to determine, is this an object I should hit or not hit? Is this a gum wrapper on the ground, or is that actually a three-dimensional baby carriage in front of me, right? So when you translate that from pixels to knowledge, that becomes very difficult, because initially it's just pixels on the screen. But once you do that, the computer inside a car is doing that thousands or millions of times per second, and making those decisions, right? And once you sort of get over that sort of chasm, computers don't get tired, they're not sleepy, they're not distracted, they're not checking their text, right? So they can do it once you train that. So you can extrapolate and then apply that to anything. So when you think of, I very often think about marketers, when you think about what could AI do or what's the potential, think about when you sort of fantasize about, if we had 8,000 interns, we could do this, right? We could take these like discrete pieces of content and reconfigure them over and over and over again based on who was coming in, right? And so that in some ways is AI. It's about scaling very subjective human tasks. Versus machine learning, which is more about predictability and kind of some of the more unknown things. So I'd say my relationships changed quite a bit because I was so close to it. And now at RollWorks, obviously being able to turn that around and taking the aspects of AI and machine learning in our solution and translate that back into something that's intuitive and not sort of scary and out there.
Yeah, this is a kind of a great transition, because you talked about like the rote or the routine tasks that AI can help with. So we're going to talk about that next in the next section. And I want to ask you, Dan, a first question around that when it comes to marketing in AI. And I think we'll talk more about like what AI can do from a routine or a habitual thing that us as humans do over and over again, but then also freeing you up to help with some of the more creative things you do at the same time. So it's like, that's interesting the way you just, explain that, which is actually kind of the next slide that I wanted to share as we move into this next section, marketing and AI, how it's smarter, faster, and more human. What is artificial intelligence? So Randi, I think you kind of gave us a good crash course.
Sorry, I jumped the gun there, yeah.
No, it's good, machine learning and AI, but I think this quote is a really great quote. I love this quote. AI is the science of making machines smart. And you kind of just explained how they do get more smart. DeepMind, Google company now. And then marketing, if AI is making the machine smarter, then marketing AI is the science of making marketing smart, if you think about it like that. And I would argue, though, it's not about just making marketing smart, it's about helping marketers and salespeople get closer to the customer, right? Get as close as you can to the customer and learn a lot about how you can better serve them. Either in a one-to-one way, in a one-to-many way, one-to-few way. We talked about how websites maybe need to be kind of reinvented to be more customer-centric. So Dan, as you look at some of these stats, right? 5.9 trillion in annual impact of AI and other analytics on marketing and sales. That's what McKinsey believes is the opportunity coming up. And we did a recent survey, 41% of B2B professionals think that AI is going to help them accelerate revenue. When you think about marketing and AI together, what is a few of the use cases? Because we actually had a question about a use case with AI and product research and launches in the chat. What are some of like the top use cases, benefits, if you will, that you think AI is going to provide marketers?
And I can piggyback a little bit off of some of what Randy said as well. I think centered on two areas that we at PathFactory are definitely focused on in terms of how AI can be used is number one, understanding content better, and more of the fact that content inherently is pretty unstructured because it's everywhere, whether you have, web pages that you have to figure out, PDFs, wherever it lives, being able to just structure it well and come up with more of a standardized set of information that you can allow you to organize and manage it better is a big piece of that too. So scale is a really, really important word. AI and scale. I remember I was talking with one of our lead data scientists, and he said AI is meant to solve scale problems, right? When you have so much data to work with, and how do you just understand it in a way that actually allows people to make decisions. So content is a big one. And then of course the relationship with that content to the customer. And really this is centered on taking all these signals that you can get, whether it's, content that leads to conversions, web activity, all the kind of engagement signals that we capture and all these other platforms capture as well. And because there's such a wide range of data sets and millions of rows that we have to work with, using that to fundamentally associate meaningful information from that content, not specifically did this one asset do something important. What are the types of assets? What are the specific attributes like topics of interest or things of that nature? What's the intent in that case of this content and how people engage with it, how they interact with it, what channels do they come from, and how does it ultimately lead to a sale or a conversion of a meaningful data point that you're looking to capture. So AI really, there's a lot, and we're still in a really early phase. We're struggling and we're learning as we go every single month. We have a lot of false starts in different ways of understanding things. A lot of this has to do with marketing as becoming such a technological problem, where marketers need to understand things like SEO, accessibility, just development techniques and knowledge outside of just standard, what marketing is for. So really using AI and scale to help with solving these problems is definitely an area that we think can be used for.
Yeah, you hit on a few things, maybe like how AI can help create more equitable experiences for everyone. That's kind of what you were saying at the end. And then the second thing is around the input versus output, which is something I think we'll talk a little bit more about as we have this conversation. Like it needs inputs and then you get an output, right? But like, where's the input coming from? Is it implicit? Is it explicit data? Like, to go back to Randy's point about training the models, that's interesting. So I want to now have Lucas and then Chris answer this next question about roadblocks. Because if you look at this list, so everyone take a look at this list. Let me pull it up. Benefits of AI on marketing. I mean, there's probably 10 bullet points on this slide. I'm not going to read through all of them, but there are definite roadblocks that companies are facing, people are just facing when trying to realize these benefits. So Lucas, first with you, then Chris, like what do you see as being like the first biggest, or maybe, one or two of the biggest roadblocks when it comes to realizing these benefits?
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. I'll be brief, given we could probably spend the rest of this conversation on this topic alone. But an important one is we all think about, not only our own use within our organizations, but thinking about how we can scale that across teams to gain some of these benefits across our companies. So I think the first one is, I'll admit a little bit of an anecdote here that may date me, but when I started my career as a PR manager, it was about 2 years before Twitter came on the scene. Twitter comes on the scene and I dismissed it. I was like, that's silly. That's never going to be a key part of PR. And now you could argue that social media is the primary pillar of any, modern PR strategy. And so I think we have the same situation with AI, where clearly there are tremendous benefits, but there's definitely going to be an education curve, particularly as, let's look at this panel right here. All of us represent some version of a tech company. you're going to move out of tech into different industries, into different regions, and you're going to have to figure out ways to help people be educated and understand what they can and can't do with it and how to best use it, because it's not always going to be the tech company. And there are, of course, great benefits for all sorts of organizations marketing all sorts of goods and services, regardless of industry. So I think one is education, us here, of course, being proponents for AI and helping broaden the education base. And secondarily, to the previous point, really thinking about, some of the challenges and risks of AI, from the bias that could go into the models to how you might apply it and end up ruining the same personalization that you're actually trying to deliver. Because at the end of the day, at marketers, we all care about that customer journey. We want that customer experience to be tremendous. I'm a big believer that AI amplifies and advocates for human intuition, but it doesn't replace it. It's not going to remove our skills, our experience, our perspectives from how we create the message, the narratives that compel and connect with our customer base. So I think those would be the two that I'd start with is, education, this webinar, of course, being a good case in point of the overall education that needs to happen. And then secondarily, all of us being advocates and mindful allies to think about bias that could go in and how to not misuse the technology when it comes out.
In the State of Marketing AI report we did with the Marketing AI Institute, which is a huge educational resource on AI, just as a quick plug, Marketing AI Institute, that was the number one thing, Lucas. People would not, or just could not adopt solutions or even understand why I would need this solution that is AI powered or has some type of AI engine, because they didn't understand it well enough. Even just like, I'm talking fundamentals, right? And they were like, well, what's the ROI, but not the ROI, what's the total cost of ownership of these things as well, which is a whole other conversation we can get into as well, because it's not just technology that's going to be helping you create these efficiencies and these better experiences, but it's also going to be people in many ways too. So that's something to think about. So yeah, Chris, before we move on to the next section, what about you? What do you see as some of these bigger roadblocks to realizing some of these benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. From my perspective, trust and inertia are the two things that really stand out as as roadblocks to adoption. Kind of builds on a little bit what Lucas was saying. Trust, because marketers, in order to let the AI do what it does, you've got to cede some of that control. We're used to having, firm rules or, strict ways that we go about things. We make the decisions. And when you turn some of those decisions over, that's hard to do, especially when they're doing these things at a scale that humans can't understand. You want that visibility into every decision and that's happening, and that's hard to get. So, overcoming that trust issue, I think, is really, through the education that Lucas was talking about, as well as, just studying those success stories of the pioneers that have gone before and what were they doing, and, what data did they need to succeed, and what use cases were best and most productive for them, and mapping what you're trying to do today, one use case to the next, so that the real potential for, the next thing is more clear. And I also mentioned inertia. It seems to those of us on the panel, and probably everybody that's attending, like, it's clear, hey, AI is coming, it's the future, we're already using it. Let's get on board and figure this out. But the rest of the world isn't yet with us. We've got, a head start, and inertia is what's holding a lot of these folks back. It's easier to keep doing things the way you always have, and I think through sharing some of these stories, some of the education Lucas talked about, and real fear of being the last one in their market to figure it out, might be the ways we really overcome that inertia problem.
Yeah, the status quo is a scary thing. It's a trap, right? And we live in the status quo in many ways because it's safe, to your point. And the trust thing is interesting too. It's like, do you trust that the AI is going to do the job correctly, so it creates the right experience either for the customer or the buyer or the salesperson? Is it going to deliver the right thing to them? Can you trust the AI, in fact, even? So that's a great point. And you talked about use cases. So let's actually transition now into use cases. And this is the one question that I'd like to have everyone answer. So be prepared. Everyone's going to answer this question when we think about AI use cases for marketers. So going back to that study we did with the Marketing AI Institute, these are the top 10 use cases, folks. Take a look at this slide that we found, that marketers, there was hundreds and hundreds of people that took this study and this survey. The marketers spoke, and these are the top 10 use cases they saw and that they were implementing. So I'm going to go through the panel. I'll start with Dan, and then I'm going to go to Randy, then Lucas, then back to you, Chris. Give us a use case and give us an example. I really want an example, something that you're doing now at your company, one of your customers is doing, and bring that to life through this use case. So Dan, go ahead.
Example, fortunately, it's a big part of our roadmap and our functionality as well is a content recommender system. So being able to take a lot of really interesting signals, whether it's, of course, understanding the content, that one piece around a big piece of it, as well as clustering content, finding the relationship between content and modeling that as well. I know that's a big piece of it. And then using signals from engagement data and various metrics on the visitor around perhaps even some firmographic or demographic information to then provide a recommender where we can scale up and understand, from a large pool of content based off of who's visiting and in real time, be able to recommend the right pieces of content. We've even expanded it into various flavors as well too. So the traditional recommender would be, take all the signals and provide the most recommended for you type of experience. But in a lot of the cases, if you look at, Netflix, where they may say, because you watch this, here's other movies like that. Or you go to Amazon and you're on a specific product page and they're going to relate things more specifically to that product or to people that are like you that bought other products. And so it's almost even finding subsets of those signals, something as simple as, let's say, based on this one content assets, what's related to that? What are the other pieces that you might be interested in? And then most importantly, applying them effectively. And this is more of the arts than the science, where to best recommend what, depending on where the customer is in the journey. And that's an important piece that we're still, I think everyone's trying to figure out, and providing even more of that control to marketers so that they can pick and choose. You don't just want a general blanket recommendation wherever you go on a website or on a customer's page. You may want it on, if I'm on a specific product page, I may want content only for that product. But if I'm on a blog post, I might want, more of a universal set of recommendations as well. So that's really the main use case we've been kind of driving is centered on a content recommender.
I mean, as a content marketer, I would love that. Number two, it's the first thing on this list that the survey found to be the thing that people are trying to do. And number three, it's kind of like what you were saying. This is a pattern that we see in our non-B2B life, just our lives, I guess, that is very common. So as someone who is selling to people at a business, I think it's just something that we have to do now in the future. We have to replicate this pattern that is very common in our everyday lives when we're not working 9 to 5 and selling to people at a business. So super important. And for me, it's also then the insight that you're going to be able to get from those recommendations to help you build better content. You're going to be able to use that information to, on the creative side, create better content, either in format, length, topic, whatever. So no, that's awesome, Dan. So Randy, going over to you now. Use case. Do you have a customer maybe you could share that's doing something interesting with your platform, RollWorks? Like, what do you think?
Sure. Well, I'm going to take a slightly different angle because I think most, if not all of these leverage another aspect of AI that isn't represented here, right? And so for those of you that don't know, RollWorks is an account-based marketing platform. And one of the uses of AI that I find, I find them all valuable, but one that I feel that is sometimes overlooked is account-based marketing, right? Is about, here's my list of target accounts, or our list of target accounts that we believe will offer the most value to us as a business. And we talk about doing things at scale, but for example, if you're a company and you have 10,000 accounts on that target account list, there's still actions that you want to be more granular, right? And so being able to apply AI to a large list of companies that could add value and prioritize that to actually score your target account list, and then be able to overlay things like real-time information. For example, there are intent signals coming from these 300 accounts that are in your top tier target account list. Of those 300, these 150 are showing intent signals for your solution or for an aspect or angle of your solution. So all of that to me is the foundation of how you would slice and dice the universe of companies that would be good for your business. And then apply them to the ways you might activate on any number of these. So one example I always like to talk about is if a company is on my top tier target account list and I can get them to my website, I might want that landing page to have an offer for $100 Grubhub gift card if they set up a meeting, or irregardless if they don't, if they're super high. So maybe if they're exhibiting intent, so I feel like there's some timeliness and they're top tier, I don't even ask them for a meeting. I just send them ask them for their email address for the Grubhub gift card, right? So there's, and you know, for all of you that are dealing with content, I might change the content to look very different based on those signals, right? So now if an account coming in is high value enough, but they're not top tier, or they're not exhibiting intent, maybe it's a $20 Starbucks gift card or even a $5 Starbucks gift card, versus if they're further down the list and it looks like there aren't some, I might change the offer. I might change the offer to be slightly different. So I think about, again, many of the things on this list are about sort of the activation, but it's funny. I think like it's almost become an afterthought that the data foundation, like I see data driven content, you know, like, well, what's the data, right? That data that you're applying it against needs to also have some meaning, right? And if you can't pull out the parameters from that data set you're activating against, then the variety of actions you might take become meaningless. So we've got to start with being able to pull out attributes from the core data set in order to activate in a way where you have variety.
Yeah, like we talked about maybe 20 minutes ago, it's the input. What are you inputting into the model to train it? I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Because that's the output then. Like, well, the model itself is important. Don't get me wrong. Like the model itself is you know, and there's nuances to how you use different AI models, and we're not going to get into that today because that's a lot of technical stuff in the back end. It's a whole other webinar. But I think what you're saying though is interesting when it comes to accounts versus contacts. Like Dan was just talking about at the contact level, serving up the right content maybe for the contact. But now you were saying use AI to also help you, maybe identify your ICP, but really focus your efforts around your ideal customer profile and the target accounts in that ideal customer profile, and which ones are maybe in market versus out of market.
Correct. In market, out market, and also where they are in a fit, right? How do they fall into the fit of within what you believe is going to be the best for your business, right? So are they in or off of your target account list, but even within that, and that gives you the ability to handle much larger target account lists. So again, be managing account-based efforts at scale, because you're even within the massive target account list, you're able to kind of derive value and timeliness against that.
Love it. All right. Thank you, Randy. So Lucas and then Chris, same question. First with you, Lucas. Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I'll talk a bit about our friends at Coupa, a global business spend management platform. Folks on this call may either be using it or familiar with it. Fantastic growth story. They're publicly traded. They've skyrocketed. Really cool to see. Their product marketing team used Highspot, and specifically our ability to surface the right content recommendations based on deal history in these unique dynamic pitch experiences for that team based on industry and patterns that our AI is able to match with, okay, here's your highest propensity to use this content with this type of persona in this type of situation. And they actually increased the engagement with these pitches over the course of the global pandemic. So all of the work from home time, they increased it 10x. And they did that because they're so able to find the right content, personalize it to the right individuals, create an experience tailored to them, all in a relatively automated plug and play type of way within our platform, pitch that out, understand what's working, what's not. And then the best part is our system can analyze all of that and surface back up what's working and what's not in these AI powered scorecards that allow the sales leader and the marketing leader to have a shared conversation based on the analysis, understand whether or not the initiative or the play or the actual pitch is working, and then feed that training and that best practice back to the team. The cycle improves, people continue to iterate and improve themselves, and you see the increase in engagement. And so it's that type of B2B engagement, understanding what works with your personas, and using AI to amplify and improve what we do with our own human intuition, and then do it at scale, that I think is one of the many ways to tap into what AI is capable of, and speaks to a number of the priorities here on this top 10 list.
And that's pre-opportunity and post-opportunity. You can do that, right?
Exactly. Both for, if you think about the prospect, and for the customer.
I love that. Love that. All right. Thank you, Lucas. And then Chris, please, what would you like to talk about when it comes to a use case or two?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to hear about all these different examples going last. Some of the, some things we're looking at have certainly been spoken about, but let me highlight, we're heavy users of our own solution, of course, and we're using machine learning, like I said, to optimize website experiences, web page experiences. So that could be homepage, landing page, and to your comment before, Mark, about inputs and outputs, the outputs are, the optimized headlines or images or page layouts, or which logo list of customers is shown, or, which success stories, content, how the navigation works, what pop-ups might appear. Like, there's so many things that we can do. That's the output. And for us, the input is the, contextual data, like what platform you're on, like what traffic source and stuff like that, behavioral data. Have you been there before? You're already a customer. Have you been to certain types of pages? And firmographic information. So like Randi was talking about, sometimes we know intent. Maybe we know you're one of our ABM customers. And so that's going to impact the output you see. And so those sorts of things mean we provide that optimized experience for every session. Each person gets a unique web experience, and it's all generated to optimize, that one thing, the conversion to the next stage in the funnel. And in our case, the conversion we really care most about is the demo request, getting someone to raise their hand to talk to sales. And so, we see good impact on moving those in the right direction. And we have some amazing customers, though, including Drift, setting benchmarks that I'm chasing every day. We'd love to get the same kind of lift in conversions that we see there, using these tactics and techniques around that web page optimization use case.
Yeah, we love it. Yeah, it's huge help. And what you hit on too is like changing that website experience up. So it's almost finally starting to get to fulfill the promise of right message, right piece of content at the right time with the right person, right? We've been saying that as marketers for 15, 20 years. I feel like AI is finally starting to get to that point. And all of you, I think, hit upon something that's really important. There is massive stuff that's happened, with privacy over the last 5-10 years. A lot of it is, non-cookie based, maybe more consent email based. But what's coming now with Apple, they just announced a ton of interesting things for Safari and Apple, right? And what's coming with Google specifically as well. It's going to be super interesting to see how we can use AI. And you all talked about these in the use cases at a more like individual first party kind of, experience. You have people coming to your website, right? And it's like, great, you better capture, or you better take advantage of someone giving you their time and attention when you're on their website or when they are on your website, and you better serve up the best experience. And you better make sure your team on the sales side and the marketing side is as educated and as trained as well to take advantage of that opportunity as well. So that is just something that I kind of like noticed as I was listening to you all talk about the use cases, right? And I think AI can really help us, cross this chasm that's coming when it comes to ad tech and third-party cookies and other things, which is super interesting. I see Dan smiling, so maybe Dan, do you want to chime in really quickly?
Oh, we ran our webinar at PathFactory on first party versus third party, and exactly everything that you just mentioned that last week. So I'm laughing at that. Yeah, it's a big challenge. I think in many ways that's part and parcel. That's the pre-AI part. How do we capture or get the inputs that matter? And I think it's on the forefront of a lot of companies' minds, at least in SaaS and cloud-based marketing and ad platforms, because it's pretty much a first-class problem. But there are ways and different signals, and there's going to be an evolution of where we go. The traditional retargeting efforts and all that may have been working for the last few years. Just like I think with marketing automation in general, there's a big evolution of, as you mentioned with Safari, trying to prevent, I think one of the big ones, they don't want to capture email opens or a lot of the pixel-based stuff that they're going to block as well. And we've been really close with a lot of Firefox and Safari are kind of in the lead of just really by default preventing a lot of things. And once Chrome kind of catches up with at least the third-party cookie blocking, there's just going to be a lot of innovation that's going to have to happen in all of our for all of us to kind of keep moving ahead with a lot of what we're trying to do. But I think the good news is that these aren't insurmountable. These are just kind of changes that we have to adapt to and work with.
Yeah, agree.
If I could jump in, it's a
go
hot
ahead. Sorry, go
topic.
ahead. Yeah.
It's, it's all of this is a little bit of a spectrum, right? You're trying to avoid the creepiness, like we know too much and show too much. You're trying to avoid the right rules. Like we prevent people from giving us PII. So we wouldn't know it's Mark or Dan or Lucas, here today, but we might know it's somebody from PathFactory and how we might want to address that. There are ways to do things without cookies. We don't actually use cookies either. And I think companies are innovating quickly to move to those more acceptable forms of driving personalization without going too far on that creepy scale and crossing the line.
Yeah, my thought could be at one point in the future, someone creates a completely different type of browser architecture, right? I don't know if that would ever happen. There's a lot of like entrenchment going on, but there could be, right? Never say never, right? In terms of how that's architected. I want to give you all a chance to think about this last answer. You have the option from two questions. One question that you could answer is just really around predictions. What is your prediction for a marketer and how they'd be using AI in 5 years? So you could answer that one if you want, or you could answer what are one use case you have coming up that is evolving AI. I mean, Dan, you kind of hinted at one of yours, so maybe you take the other question, but I need a use case that's coming. That's not like you're doing right now that you think your business is going to do, or it is planning on doing, or, something around, say the next 1 to 2 years. So you can decide, folks, which one you want to answer. But as you think of that question, Ola has a question in the chat. And if anyone else has questions, just throw it in the chat. Anyone know how AI solutions will impact social media like LinkedIn, Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram? People seem to be putting large amounts of their work time in those places. Anyone want to take a stab at answering that before we get to that last question?
I can do a quick one. We were working with a company for a little bit that is kind of in that space, definitely to at least analyze a lot of that data. So from the perspective of, I think their use case was centered on using a lot of social media posts and information that's littered there to understand what people are interested in, pretty much, because there's quite a bit of information there, and tying that to as a different type of signal in a way to some types of call to actions or things of that nature based off of that information. So won't get too into the details. It was more of a side piece. We're not really personally ourselves in social media side, but that was an interesting use case of how they were using AI in that context.
I have one to maybe help, and then we can get to these predictions or future use cases. And Lucas, I'm going to have you go first. So FYI, heads up. I heard of a company starting to build a way to basically predict potential churn, cancellations based off of things that people are saying on social media, because it's such a place to broadcast out how you feel about a brand or a product. Use that to be able to then triage those things, and also at the same time use that as a way to determine, oh wow, this person's an advocate or a super fan or has propensity to maybe buy some more from us because of what they're saying. So I think there's a ton when it comes to that. I mean, it's for Drift, right? It's conversational, insights, conversational AI, if you will. All of those things are just snippets of a conversation someone is having maybe with themselves or someone else, and you could do something with that. So that's interesting. So Lucas, which one do you want to answer? What's going to be the next 5 years from now from a marketer standpoint using AI, or what's an up and coming use case for you folks at Highspot?
I'll take next 5 years for 500, Mark.
Okay.
So, I think it relates actually to some commentary we had earlier in the conversation where, we have this educational movement that needs to take place in this webinar. Again, one small part of that, which is fantastic. And I think we've also seen over the course of the past year and a half, a move to not just the consumer on the B2C side, but the consumer on the B2B side in terms of partnerships and investments that a business makes in the technology or the services that it uses, looking for a higher bar for corporate responsibility. And so I think over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a call for that same level of rigor and commitment to everything from DE&I to really, contributing to the greater good, be a part of how people think about the use of AI and machine learning in the businesses and technologies that they partner with and use, and then in how they use it themselves. And, earlier we talked about the models. The input into those models is really important because the output you get is going to be formed by the inputs that go into it. And if those inputs have implicit bias in them, they're going to lead to that same outcome on the other side. And so I think we all have a responsibility as both organizations that are delivering AI in some form, as well as people who consume it and can hold it to a bar ourselves, to really think about how we can create, unbiased, truly compatible for all artificial intelligence that improves that customer experience, improves the efficiency of marketing programs, but also helps contribute to broader societal awareness and ultimately a greater community for all.
Love that one. That's great. Thank you, Lucas. That's fantastic. Randi, next 5 years or an up-and-coming use case?
Yeah, I think I'll take the next 5 years aspect. And I want to say, kind of following onto my first point about what AI is and the fear some people might have that it's taking over all of our jobs, and really more talk about what is AI going to ask of us as marketers in the next 5 years and then moving forward. And AI will take over a huge part of our jobs that are mundane, right? And rote, and not just checking boxes, but even creating, I've seen cases where AI is actually writing scripts for movies, right? Like based on plots and things. And so it can do very creative things. But the one thing that AI so far is not very good at is coming up with the questions. And so I think as marketers, our jobs are actually always just to be asking the what ifs. So even, in examples we were talking about before, company looks like this, or they're this size, or they're on our towel or not on our towel. Well, how does that change Tuesday to Wednesday? What if I do this Tuesday? What if I do it at 10 a.m. versus 4 a.m., right? So if you think about all the what ifs, what if I make it green instead of orange? Like they are never ending. And so I think what's exciting as marketers is it really escalates us to be able to be critical thinkers and asking the questions and getting the answers very quickly. And so when I think about, as a marketer, how do you kind of look at your life in 5 more years? AI is going to be everywhere eventually, right? It's stocking the shelves in the supermarket. You don't think about it, but you definitely go to the supermarket where they're more likely to have the things you're looking for when you're there. That there's AI behind that in many supermarkets. So it's going to be everywhere, but as marketers, our jobs are going to be more and more about coming up with the questions, and not too many, but the right amount, and being able to test it. So that's what's really exciting about the future is the curiosity, and those of us who have it is going to be satisfied with a lot of the AI that we've got out there.
That's a great one. Yeah, I've been talking a lot about creative intelligence recently. It's these like 5 quotients. And I really believe that we're going to be able to use more of our creative intelligence because of AI. And it's going to also help us as marketers spend more time with our customers and buyers, and not so much behind the computer programming the automation, programming the sequence, programming whatever. And I love that one. Chris, and then Dan. So you can pick again, 5 years from now or an up and coming use case you're super excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I was going to talk about, the panelists before have highlighted the importance of understanding where AI makes a big impact and where are the things that humans need to keep doing and getting the right balance there, and some of that creativity and things you're talking about. Seeing how AI in the future, 5 years from now, can better support the humans on that side of things is going to be a big element. Since you already mentioned that, maybe I'll mention a couple of things that we've got on our plate for AI. We want to do better, ad targeting on the digital side, ABM accounts and other things to, particularly on the social media ads. That's important to us, and we know AI can help us there. And we're looking at a solution that can help us around SEO content planning, helping identify white space in the market and things that would then allow us to, address those with the right kind of content that are aligned with messages and things we need to do. So I think there's just going to be a long list of possible AI solutions, and marketers are going to have to sort of look at what are their needs and adapt and pull in and prioritize the things that are most important to help them move the ball towards their objectives, because you can only adopt one thing or maybe two a quarter. You can't do everything first. So that becomes the challenge. How do you prioritize which of these possible solutions are next on your list? Those are two for us.
I love those. I mean, it's like the high impact, low effort. I mean, it'd be great if everything was that, right? But if it's like high impact, high effort, high impact, low effort, that's what we want AI to focus us on, like focus and prioritize. That's great. All right, so Dan, last one, and then I know you all have some stuff you want to share with the audience as takeaways. So go ahead, Dan.
Sure, it kind of answers a little bit of A and B, I think, and more centered on some of the points that have been touched on by everyone, including yourself, Mark, around like even the automation side. But I think ultimately, in 5 years, especially, like AI will help us make decisions better. Just from, there's so much information to parse through, whether it's like what type of campaign to run next, like if you want to focus on a marketing standpoint versus a myriad of other things, or here's a list of songs you want to play, which one do you want to, which one we think you may like, which one do you want? And it kind of gets into even the conversational side of the fence. So I think that's it's just going to get better. That's probably a big part of it. So we ultimately have the final say, perhaps, in terms of next steps or actions taken, but offering and filtering through a lot of potential decisions into the ones that should be the most relevant for the person needing to make that decision.
I love that. So you heard it first from Dan. AI is going to help us with our decision fatigue. So consider that, the golden ticket, basically. Love that. All right. So we got to a lot of questions. Thanks for the engagement, folks. Really quickly, I know we're a little bit over. Just want to share a few things from this team of amazing people. First, from Drift, this webinar in many ways was inspired from the State of Marketing AI report. We did this with the Marketing AI Institute. It's free. You can check it out on the Drift website. A ton of amazing data about what marketers think is going on, what they believe is going on, and what they think is going to happen in the future around AI. Feel free to check that out. And then Lucas, you have something that you want to share from Highspot.
Yeah, in the depths of 2020, we surveyed marketers. Interesting time to survey marketers about the challenges they were experiencing. You can imagine we were experiencing many challenges, and some of those I think are evergreen, if you will. Some of those were very commonplace or created by what was happening in the pandemic. So we took that, and we, as opposed to look back, we really looked forward and said, okay, what does that teach us about where we're going to go? And you'll actually find some insights about how to use our artificial intelligence to unlock what we're just talking about, the efficiencies, making the hard things easier, as well as some strategies that I think you can really put in place to have affecting, compelling engagements with your prospects and customers at scale over the long time in a personalized way. Available on our website, as I know all these assets will be, and I think you'll get a lot out of it.
Love that one. Thank you, Lucas. Randy, you have something to offer up as well. Oh, you're on mute. No worries.
Got it off there. Sorry, Lucas. I'll when you find a place to take lessons, let me know. Yeah, we do quite a bit of content at RollWorks. So it was difficult picking, but I picked a guide that's been pretty popular the past few months, which is just a way to demystify account-based marketing and how it can work for you. This is gives you some simple tips if you're just getting your toe wet in ABM. If you're a little bit further down your path, we've got some more sophisticated content on our site. So hope you all enjoy it. The B2B Marketer's Guide to ABM. Love it. Super important from a go-to-market strategy today. Account-based, anything, marketing, experiences, engagement, so many different flavors now. But this is a great one. Thank you, Randy. Awesome. And then Intellimize, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a guide we put together that really helps explain, how do you move from, your static landing page, homepage to, and away from a couple personalization rules or maybe A/B tests that are, take a long time to run to something that's really a much more fluid, dynamic site that, it's ever personalized, continuously changing and testing and driving those conversions for the folks that come, all driven by machine learning and AI. Of course, it's on the website, but just email me, hello@intellimize.com, and we'll get you a copy real quick.
Dynamic website that never sleeps. I love it. And finally, Dan, you got something from PathFactory.
Sure. We have the Savvy B2B Marketer's Guide to Using AI to Boost Pipeline and Revenue. Kudos to the marketing team. So really a pretty high level overview and a relative deep dive into how AI can be used within various marketing contexts. Very content focused, of course, because we are a content intelligence platform. And just kind of going over how different techniques can be used and what are the concepts that can be understood as well. So the education piece that we've been talking about to just help inform and provide information on giving marketers a toolkit in using AI throughout their jobs.
Fantastic. 5 amazing resources, plus many, many more on all of our websites. Thank you, everyone, for giving us your time today. Hope you found it valuable. Thank you to all of the panelists. Really appreciate it. Really value the partnerships we all have with each other's organizations. Thanks again, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.